looks like that time again. It is a Wednesday, lovely Wednesday around the Central Coast. I'm Charles Freedman, and it's time for News Talk here on SantaCruzVoice.com. Yes, indeed. News Talk from 9 till noon every weekday. That's what we're all about here. Telephone number to reach the program is 831-265-5050. 831-265-5050. Well, today I'm going to talk about something I haven't talked about at all up to now. And it's been somewhat of a story. I'll leave it to you to decide how significant it is. I am speaking about the Epstein situation. Now, this appears to be an example of where Mr. Trump and some of his fellow MAGA people seem to be hoist on their own petard. What do I mean by that? Mr. Trump and his more ardent followers have been fond over time of trading on certain narratives that simply did not stand up to examination. For example, President Trump, before he was president, went around all over the place mongering the Obama was born in Kenya nonsense. Now, I was a vociferous critic of the Obama administration during its entire 8 years of sufferance. But at no point did I ever swallow the foolishness that Barack Obama was not a natural-born citizen and therefore not eligible to be president. This was utter foolishness. And yet, just the other night, I'm watching a little bit of Greg Gutfeld, whom I enjoy. He's funny. He's, terrifically witty. And he pulls a Obama's birth certificate joke, and I just kind of wince and say, humor to be funny needs to be based in truth. I don't know how many times I've made that point. You don't believe me? Ask people like Jack Benny, who actually know what's funny. And they'll tell you, if it doesn't ring true, it isn't funny. So the Obama was born in Kenya foolishness, for any objective, reasonable person, made Mr. Trump look foolish. And, he doesn't play those records that much anymore, thank God. Quit beating that dead horse. So what's the latest? Well, there has been a lot of, what should I say, a mystery woven around the Epstein files and around Jeffrey Epstein's death. Oh, he didn't commit suicide. He was murdered to silence him and put him out of the way. And again, this has been a trope of certain individuals. And I haven't spoken about it until now because, frankly, things of this nature, it's always possible that it's true, huh? I'll give you an example. Right after the 2020 election, the day after, Mr. Trump and other people started saying there was fraud here. And the election was stolen. I didn't comment on it. For about a week, I didn't comment on it because, in my view, hey, it was possible. As a matter of fact, since I had voted for Mr. Trump and I loathed and despised Mr. Biden, I was hoping that the story was true and that this fraud would come to light, and perhaps a couple of states could be shifted and the election result changed. But it rather rapidly became obvious to me when examinations and investigations and canvasses were undertaken in some of these close states. No, the results weren't changing. The massive fraud had not occurred. Mr. Trump had simply lost enough votes to wind up out of office for 4 years. He came back That's fine. But my willingness has always been wait and see. And if it had turned out that there really was something to the allegations of voter fraud in 2020, I would have been one of the people screaming loudest about it. So you might be saying, well, today you're going to talk about the Epstein case. What has changed? What is new? Why do you now feel that you can talk about it? Well, what I've been looking for, waiting for, hoping for, is something to appear that to me would be credible and explanatory. What do I want for credibility? Well, I want somebody whom I trust, somebody whom I believe to be of good integrity, and that person also has to have the knowledge. I have to be satisfied that they actually know what they're talking about. Today I got my wish, and it was granted by none other than Alan Dershowitz. Now, to people who look at presentations, particularly on the law, Alan Dershowitz is a familiar name. He's been around for many, many years. He is a law professor emeritus at Harvard Law School. Politically, Alan Dershowitz has been a standard garden variety liberal Democrat. Until recently, Mr. Dershowitz has left the Democratic Party. And the issue that compelled his change, anti-Semitism. Mr. Dershowitz is, in addition to being an esteemed professor of law and a legal authority, also happens to be Jewish. And also happens to be of an age to where phrases like the final solution and the Holocaust actually means something to him. And when he hears Democrats going around saying globalize the Intifada, he knows damn well what it means. This is a phrase spoken by people whose only quarrel with Adolf Hitler was that he didn't finish the job. And essentially that's what globalizing the Intifada is calling for. Don't just kill the Jews in Israel. Kill them wherever they are, throughout the world. Globalize the Intifada. So yes, Dershowitz is a person whom I admire and trust. So does he have knowledge? Well, it appears, I didn't know this, but Dershowitz was Epstein's attorney. We know that under American jurisprudence, everyone, no matter who, right up to and including Al Capone, deserves legal representation when they go into court. Alan Dershowitz was Jeffrey Epstein's mouthpiece. So, given this is who we're listening to, and given this was his point of vantage, what does Alan Dershowitz have to say about this? I was Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer. I know the facts, some of which I can't disclose because it's privileged or subject to court-imposed sealing orders. But what I can disclose make several things clear. Epstein never created a client list. The FBI interviewed alleged victims who named several clients. These names have been redacted. They should be disclosed, but the courts have ordered them sealed. I know who they are. They don't include any current office holders. We don't know whether the accusations are true. The courts have also sealed negative information about some of the accusers to protect them. Neither the Justice Department nor private defense lawyers are free to disregard court sealing orders. The media can and should petition the courts for release of all names and information so the public can draw its own conclusions. There has also been speculation about incriminating videos taken by hidden cameras in Epstein's guest bedrooms. There are videotapes, but they are of public areas of his Palm Beach, Florida home. Epstein reported the theft of money and a licensed firearm from a drawer in his living room, so police installed a video camera. I am not aware of video cameras in guest bedrooms. Open records show an acquaintance between Epstein and Mr. Trump many years ago. That relation ended when Mr. Trump reportedly banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago, long before becoming president. I have seen nothing that would suggest anything improper or even questionable by Mr. Trump. It is clear from the evidence that Epstein committed suicide. What isn't clear is whether he was assisted by jail personnel. That seems likely to me, based on the evidence of allegedly broken cameras, transfer of his cellmate, and the absence of guards during the relevant period of time. I have absolutely no doubt that Epstein never worked for any intelligence agency. If he had, he would have told me and his other lawyers who would have used that information to get him a better deal. He wasn't satisfied with the so-called sweetheart deal he got, which required him to spend 1.5 years at a local jail and register as a sex offender. My sources in Israel have confirmed to me that he had no connections to Israeli intelligence. That false story, recently peddled by Tucker Carlson. Him again? Maybe Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones should be marooned on an island together. Probably emanated from credible allegations that Robert Maxwell, father of Epstein's former girlfriend Ghislaine Maxwell, worked with the Mossad. Conspiracy stories attract readers, viewers, and listeners. They are also fodder for political attacks. The Epstein case has generated more than its share of such theories, and there is nothing more annoying to gossip mongers than when stubborn facts, or the absence of facts, get in the way of a juicy theory. Sorry to disappoint you, but there is really nothing much to see here beyond what has already been disclosed. In my view, this closes the question. And it is my intention, now that I have shared this with all of you, it's my intention never to discuss the Epstein case again. We now have the story. Now, I've made it clear on my program, time after time, callers are the most important element of the program. If a caller subsequently calls up and raises the Epstein story, that caller will have that opportunity and we'll discuss it. But I don't intend to bring it up again. Ever. Because, as Mr. Dershowitz has pointed out, there's really no story here. There's tragedy. There's reprehensible behavior on the part of Mr. Epstein. There's the fact that Dershowitz says here he wasn't satisfied with the sweetheart deal he got, which 1.5 years in jail and register as a sex offender. It seems to me, it's possible anyway, I don't know, I never met Mr. Epstein, I don't know anything about him personally. It seems to me that possibly one of the things that was most impactful on him was the embarrassment, the knowledge that his activities had now come to light, that people understood who he was, what he'd done, and how he'd operated. And that was a factor in his decision to take his own life. I don't know. It's possible. But again, the the idea that there is some conspiracy here and that, there's documents that need to be unearthed and truths that need to be told. And I'm sorry. It's just, maybe it's part of my basic constitution, but when people come up with that kind of thing, I have always been, well, let me just say, highly resistant to such nonsense. To me, it appears as a peddler of snake oil urging me to sample his wares. And I don't care to, because, that snake oil stuff, there's some weird stuff in there. And I'm not going to swallow it. You don't know what's in it. You don't know where it's been. Those words echo in my mind. Pay attention to Mom. Stay away from conspiracy theorists. You'll live a longer, happier life. Time's 22 minutes past 9 o'clock. I'm Charles Freedman. This is my radio program where we do news talk every weekday from 9 to noon. I'm going to go ahead and run my first ad package now, and then we'll move on to a different topic. Again, if any of you out there want to call and talk about Epstein, we will. But if that doesn't happen, I will consign him to the depths as of now.
The Hook is California's first ever cannabis outlet. 100% locally owned and operated, we're here to be your friendly neighborhood hookup. We believe that everyone should have access to fairly priced cannabis, so we work hard to get it to you for 30 to 50% less than the other guys. If you're 21 or older with a valid ID, visit us in Capitola or in Watsonville today. We're here to be your friendly neighborhood hookup. Check out our website, hookoutlet.com, for deals and stay groovy.
Hello, I'm Carolyn. 25 years ago, my husband Rudy and I opened Charlie Hong Kong with the commitment to serve healthy food grown in healthy soil. Today, the healthy food we serve comes from the sacred land in Pajaro Valley, where Dick Peugeot and his Lakeside Organics grow the soil, and the soil grows the healthy plant that we serve to you. When you eat at Charlie Hong Kong, you eat healthy food, and it's delicious. Charlie Hong Kong, Santa Cruz.
Tomatoes, carrots, radishes, onions, squash, watermelon, all things we must eat regularly to survive. Hi folks, Warren Knox here. Wouldn't it be great to just walk out your front or back door and right there you can pick pesticide and chemical-free food that you grew? You can do just that with a Knox Garden Box, a heavily constructed, elevated garden box that will allow you to grow just about any vegetable or flower there is. Sold assembled or unassembled, shipped worldwide. The therapy of gardening is just a call away. You can find your Knox Garden Box built in Scotts Valley, California, or log on to www.knoxgardenbox.com. Our staff will answer any questions on gardening, so if you don't have a green thumb, believe we can see that you do. Okay, phone number to call is 831-461-0634. Thanks, folks.
At 9:25, we continue with News Talk on the Charles Freedman radio program. The big news in Washington today is that once again, Vice President J.D. Vance has, with his tie-breaking vote as presiding officer of the U.S. Senate under the Constitution, enabled the passage of a rescission bill. Now, frankly, I don't know why. Let me start again. There's a reason why this is being made a big deal of. The bill is for rescission of some $9 billion in previously appropriated funds. Now, there was a time when Everett Dirksen was able to say, a billion here, a billion there, pretty soon you're talking real money. But that was when the entire federal budget was about $100 billion. So a billion was 1% of the federal budget. $9 billion would have been almost 10% of the federal budget. Today, the federal budget is in the trillions. A trillion is 1,000 billion. The point I'm trying to make here is that a $9 billion rescission when measured against a $4 trillion budget, amounts to the impact of a gnat bite on an elephant. And that is why it is difficult for me to see why such a monumental to-do has been made over this. It really isn't that big a deal. But the mere fact that it has become a big deal in itself tells us something. It tells us just how really difficult it is, once government grows, to cut it back. It's easy to think of, for example, that rose bush in your front yard. And it gets overgrown and you go out and you cut it back every year and it grows back and you get your roses and you're happy and it's decorative. And hopefully you don't get stuck on the thorns. But that's no analogy with the federal government. The federal government, once it grows to a certain size, any effort to pare it back meets with cries of anguish from concerned individuals who have, and there's always somebody who is actually benefiting from that expenditure. And that somebody's going to come in and tell you, without this, I'll die! You're killing me! The question should always be asked, well, how did you live before? How did you live before? And that's generally met with silence. But the political reality of this is that it took Vice President Vance once again to cast a vote 51-50, and the rescission bill passed. Now, once again, this is going to have to go back to the House and have them repass it because the Senate made a couple of changes. They weren't huge changes. One of them, Senator Mike Rounds of South Dakota, a state which has a large population of American Indians, wanted some provision made so that the government could continue underwriting the activities of radio stations on Indian reservations. No, I'm not going to. So this is a national priority. This is something that the taxpayers of the United States of America should. I mean, it's not a matter of do you like Indians or not? Do you think Indians ought to be able to run radio stations? Of course they should. There's no question about that. The question is, do I have to pay for it? I can't even receive the signals of these radio stations. I don't know. It just... The justifications that are offered for every penny of federal expenditure would be enough to try the patience of a person far more gently disposed than myself. So we have a $9 billion rescission bill, which will now go back to the House and probably be passed there. It was originally passed in the House by a vote of 214 to 212. So once again, the other story to come out of this is that Democrats are absolutely, completely, and utterly united. We hear about, well, there's divisions among Democrats. No, there isn't. What do we have to look at? Democrats today. There are House and Senate delegations. There are 47 Democratic senators, almost half. There are 212 Democratic representatives, almost half. We look at them, they represent their party in the National Congress. This is the face the Democratic Party presents to America. We are Democrats, this is who we are. No, 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 no. Well, why don't you, do you believe there's any waste, fraud, abuse in the federal government? No, every penny is dreadfully needed. Well, we're spending trillions more than we're taking in on a yearly basis. Do you care? They say they do, but they don't. They say they care about the deficit, but you ask them, well, what measures would you undertake to reduce the deficit? The only answer that they can come up with, they do have one answer: raise taxes dramatically. Now, what would that cause? This is why they voted against that big bill a couple of weeks ago. If that bill had failed, tax rates would automatically have risen by some 60% in December, just a few months from now. That kind of a tax increase would have thrown the economy into a recession. Democrats don't care. The needs of government are more important than the needs of people. Now, they don't see it that way. They say, well, the government is taking money for people. We take it from people and give it to other people. So the government essentially is Robin Hood. Here's a novel concept for you. Robin Hood was a fink. You're asking, where did I get that? I happen to be an admirer of Ayn Rand. Her seminal work, her tour de force, was a thing called Atlas Shrugged. And the principal idea of the book, there's this guy, John Galt. And nobody's seen him. Nobody knows who he is. But, who is John Galt? That's the first line of the book. Well, it seems that John Galt is a guy who has looked at a society going down the same path that ours is today. And he realizes that in that society, there are creative people. There are the Elon Musks of the world and others. And there's everybody who essentially is living off of them and holding them back and throwing roadblocks in their path and siphoning off their resources so that their ability to create and to innovate is impaired or even negated. And the idea of the book is that these people, one by one, are simply disappearing. They're not murdered, no corpses found, nothing of that sort. They're just gone, vanished. If you ever decide to read the book, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but I will tell you this. It is the most arduous reading you will ever undertake. I believe a copy of Atlas Shrugged is something like 1,100 pages of prose. I read it once, many years ago, and I remember that there's a certain point in the book where Robin Hood is discussed. You remember the story of Robin Hood? He and his merry men lived in the forests of Nottingham, or the Sherwood Forest, that was it. And they robbed from the rich and gave to the poor. And Ayn Rand devotes 50 pages, count them, 50, to a presentation. I believe it's John Galt who's speaking, but I can't remember that. It's been too long ago. But I do remember the gist of it. This entire model, this idea of Robin Hood robbing from one to give to another, that Robin Hood truly was a criminal. The sheriff of Nottingham should have caught him, locked him up, and made him stop. Now, of course, the one thing that had changed between the days of Robin Hood and modern times. In Robin Hood's day, why was a person rich? Well, because he managed to steal more from other people. This was the days of feudalism. And the way you became rich was to take something somebody else had or to compel the labor of other people. A feudal system is basically a slave system. My point here is that this was a time before capitalism. Capitalism is a relatively new idea, much as the United States of America is a relatively new nation. We were both born of the Enlightenment, the Age of Reason. Under capitalism, the idea of enslaving another human being, the idea of compelling another person's work, essentially stealing that person's product, well, stealing, there the word is. It's theft. It is not legitimate activity. It is illegal. There's nothing capitalist about it. It's a crime, and you should be jailed. Now, under that system, under a capitalist system, Robin Hood's model is nothing but theft. If a person has a large fortune, let's use the largest as an example. Elon Musk is right now the owner of the largest net worth on the face of the globe. Now, if Mr. Musk had acquired that worth by going around hitting people on the head and taking their money, then he'd be a criminal. But he's never done that. Instead, what has he done? He has built enterprises, offered products and services to people for which they willingly pay. Mr. Musk provides service. He serves other people on a daily basis. Say you want to make a post on X. Mr. Musk makes X available to you for your post. And if you want to reach people who are on X and you purchase advertising on X, Mr. Musk then puts up your advertising. If you want to buy an electric car, which has the reputation of being just about the best electric car you can buy, you go to Tesla and you buy a car. You buy that car from Elon Musk. He and his company have designed it and built it. You buy it. You give him money. Elon Musk makes part of that money. The rest of it, of course, goes to pay the people who made the car and pay for the materials in the car. You know, real simple stuff like that. If you are the U.S. government and you wish to put a satellite into orbit, you go to Elon Musk, to his company SpaceX, and you say, Mr. Musk, we have this satellite we'd like you to put in orbit. What will you charge us to do that? And he says, well, that'll be $72 million or whatever. And the government says, oh, maybe they haggle with him. They say, oh, no, we're only going to give you 60. So at some point, it's just like anything else. Life's a flea market. A bargain is made. Mr. Musk drops his price a bit. The federal government raises their offer a bit. And there's a meeting at a certain figure. And Mr. Musk and SpaceX launch the satellite, and the government pays him. No one uses a gun or a knife. No behavior is compelled. Everything is voluntary. All exchanges are between a willing buyer and a willing seller. That's capitalism. Nobody gets exploited. Everybody agrees to what goes on. And if they don't agree, it doesn't happen. If Mr. Musk's price for launching the satellite is too high, then the government will say, I'm sorry, we won't pay you that much. To hell with you. We'll do without the satellite. Or we'll try to find out some other way to launch it, but we're not going to pay your price. Fine. At that point, the exchange does not take place. So when Ayn Rand wrote about Robin Hood, wrote denigratively about Robin Hood, I think she was supposing that, a Robin Hood operating in a capitalist society, at which point that person becomes a criminal and needs to be locked up because they're nothing more than a thief. They're taking from somebody. If you go out and rob Elon Musk of $1 billion, you say, well, what does he care? He's got lots of billions of dollars. That's not the point. That's not the point. If somebody came out here and took 10 of my records, well, what do you've got 10,000 records. Why are you so upset about 10? Well, those 10, those are part of my collection. I happen to like those. They're mine. I found them. I acquired them, and they're my property. And you have no right to take them. No right at all. If you want them, offer me something for them. Offer me a trade. Maybe you'll come up with some record I like better. Then we can do a deal. And at that point, I have no complaints. Anyway, if you ever read Atlas Shrugged, for 50 pages you will be treated to a detailed description of just exactly why Robin Hood is a villain. It's one of the things I've taken away from that book with me for all of these years. And so when I look at modern Democrats, this seems to be the only model they embrace. We want to give something to these people. How do we get it? We take it away from those people. How do you do that? We use the government to do it. We use the coercive power of the state. We tax them. We regulate them. We impede them. Essentially, we treat them the way Dagny Taggart was treated in Atlas Shrugged. And sooner or later, of course, Miss Taggart disappears. Where does she go? Read the book. I'm not going to tell you anymore. But the point is, talking about this rescission bill, that this is what led to this whole diatribe here. It seems such a testimony to the intransigence, imperviousness of our modern system that reducing federal expenditure by a paltry $9 billion out of a multi-trillion-dollar budget, again, this is a negligible amount. And yet, the Democrats are absolutely united, 100%, every man, every woman standing against it. From time to time on the program, I've said they must never win another federal election. I mean it. We've already had a taste. Joe Biden's administration, Mr. Biden was pretty much non-compos mentis. So who was running the country? The Democrats. Mr. Biden's party. The people he brought into his administration, the people who were around him, his inner circle that we hear about, these people who had access to the auto pen, they were all in league with and of a mind with the congressional Democrats whose activities we're witnessing on a daily basis. They're reading from the same playbook and singing from the same hymns. We see people complaining about the federal deficit today. It's way too high. It's come down significantly from Mr. Biden's levels. The problem, Mr. Biden boosted it so high that actually reducing it down to zero, actually balancing the budget, is now regarded as a pipe dream. If it's doable at all, it's doable over a period of a number of years during which the American economy is going to have to grow significantly. That's the only way we're going to get out of this mess. We have to grow our way out of it. At present, our deficit is, 120%? Or our national debt, rather, is 120% of GDP. If we raise our GDP, then that number goes down. Even if the debt remains the same or grows, the debt to GDP ratio will improve. Does that make a difference? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Think about it this way. We were talking about Elon Musk a few minutes ago. Let's suppose that Elon Musk owes somebody $1 billion. Well, that's a lot of money, but Mr. Musk is capable of discharging that kind of a debt. He can pay $1 billion. What if you owe somebody $1 billion? You're dead. You can't pay anybody $1 billion. Neither can I. Neither can almost anybody else you ever heard of. So the question of debt, or how much you owe, is absolutely relative to your assets, what you have. If you can pay your bills, even if they're very, very high, then that's cool. There are some people to whom, you come up and say, hey, you owe me $10. Oh my God. Forget it. Hey, your average homeless bum, somebody like that. What are you going to do? Go up and ask him for $10? He doesn't have $10. So don't be silly. Time is, 9:48. I'm Charles Freedman. Phone number to reach the program, 831-265-5050, 831-265-5050. So, Republicans move one step closer to clawing back billions in foreign aid. The rescission request came out in spite of some fear the cuts will undermine American influence and global public health. So this wasn't an across-the-board cut. These were targeted cuts in certain areas. And that seems to be one of the problems. The three Republicans who voted no were Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Susan Collins of Maine, and Mitch McConnell of Kentucky. I noticed that Mr. Tillis of North Carolina, who was a no vote on the big bill a few weeks ago, voted yes on this. Mitch McConnell, who voted yes a few weeks back, voted no this time. Now, for this, certain MAGA people will scream and howl at them. Mr. Tillis, of course, has been driven from the U.S. Senate. Mr. McConnell is retiring anyway. He's old and infirm. But this idea that you may not dissent ever, well, that's kind of uncool in itself. This is Vance's sixth tie-breaking vote in the U.S. Senate. So I guess he's averaging about one a month. Now, it should be noted, during her 4 years as vice president, Kamala Harris set an all-time record for the number of times she cast a vote. Of course, the Senate was evenly divided at that point. You had a 50-50 Senate, and time after time, that's how the vote came down. She would always cast the tie-breaking vote. This is why it was so terrible that Mr. Trump's machinations cost us 2 Senate seats in Georgia right after his defeat in 2020, with those 2 Senate seats, or just one of them, didn't have to have both, with just one of them, Mitch McConnell would have still been majority leader and would have been able to block a tremendous, we might have been able to block some of those idiotic spending bills that caused the inflation. Oh, speaking of which, we are still living in Joe Biden's economic world. I was looking at a piece just a moment ago that was making the point on this, and it was also bringing home something that I find rather, well, it's unfair, but it's real. Prices rose considerably during the Biden administration. Mr. Biden let the inflationary genie out of the bag, and Americans were very upset by it. Since that time, price increases have moderated. We find today inflation, the latest figure, 2.7. There's controversy as to just exactly how accurate that figure is, whether it cherry picks or what. The point is that we are no longer in a 9% inflationary environment, nowhere near it. But those prices that rose, they haven't come back down again, for the most part. I think that the price of eggs has come down somewhat, but the price there, the increase there was due not so much to inflation as it was to a disease that ravaged the laying hens. Once that population is replenished, you could expect prices to return to normal. But any price that was increased as a result of inflation remains high. And topping the list of that is housing. Just looking at something, the median price of a house in the United States, not California, in the United States, is something like $430,000. Now, I realize these are inflated dollars, and that's not really reflective of reality, but just the same, that price is an awful lot of people out of the market. According to this same piece, the average age of a first-time home buyer these days is 38 years. So people are halfway through their lives before they can think about buying a home. We're talking about people who have been married for a number of years. Their kids, they've had their kids. The kids are growing. And they're still living in an apartment. And they don't like it. Now, the problem here, the political problem, is that although Joe Biden and his orchestra were responsible for this inflationary surge, they're gone now, and the people who are in charge of the federal government are now Donald Trump and his orchestra. And now there's nothing fair about this, but whoever happens to be in the seat at the moment is the one who gets the eggs and tomatoes thrown at him. And if Mr. Trump and this administration have not taken some action to bring down mortgage rates by the next election, or by, maybe next spring, there will be hell to pay at the polls. Mr. Mamdani's big issue in his left-wing whack job campaign for mayor of New York, affordability, housing affordability. How does he propose to do something about this? Oh, we'll freeze rents. Well, obviously, this is no solution. That will merely guarantee that landlords withdraw their properties, that properties that are rented out will be poorly maintained. It is a recipe for destruction, not construction. Mr. Trump should be about the other. One of the things that would be fortuitous would be if interest rates were to begin to come down, and Mr. Trump understands that. He's been haranguing the Fed to bring down interest rates, but at the same time, he has imposed tariff policies which are now beginning to affect prices. When you impose 50% tariffs on things like copper, steel, and aluminum, basic materials that go into the building of so many of the things we need, both large and small, then the price of those manufactured articles produced in America is going to go up to reflect those additional costs. That is simple arithmetic. It's not a matter of politics. If Mr. Trump and Republicans are unsuccessful in righting America's economic ship, the rocks upon which they go aground will be the tariff rocks. Because right now, if we were looking at, for example, a 2% annual increase in prices rather than 2.7, there would be a forthcoming reduction from the Fed, which would enable all kinds of other good things. But with prices maintaining this steady climb, the Fed will say, no, we're not going to raise rates. They're not going to go in that direction. But the time will not be right for a reduction. And a reduction is what the economy really needs. And I put it to you that the reason we're not getting it is because of the increase, the inflationary pressure produced by Mr. Trump's tax increases. And that's what tariffs are. They're taxes. Add to that the rather disjointed fashion, herky-jerky, up, down, on today, off tomorrow. I was looking at Bill O'Reilly the other day, and he said, I don't comment about Mr. Trump's tax regime because it changes all the time. I thought, that's right. It's very difficult to make public comment on something that from day to day can show these monumental changes. And that in itself is a problem. Businesses, in order to operate efficiently, have to be able to plan, have to be able to know, well, this is what our materials are going to cost, this is what it's going to cost us to produce the product we produce, this is our profit margin, this is what we can sell for. From one week to the next, they don't know. So, the economy looks rosy with the one exception of tariff uncertainty. It is 10 o'clock. I'm Charles Freedman. More in 6 minutes. Please stay tuned to SantaCruzVoice.com. Jeez. Once more, an hour begins. It is 10:06. Thank you very much for being with me today on the Charles Freedman radio program. We are taking your phone calls at 831-265-5050, 831-265-5050. You still have open to you the honor of being today's first caller. Remember, when you make the call, you get to decide where we go. Yep, even there. So pour that second cup of coffee and settle back for some news talk, and we'll, hey, I'll be damned. Looks like we did get our first caller right then and there. Well, let's not keep that person waiting. That's not my way. Boom. There we go. Hi there.
Hey, Charles.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Hey, it's Evan. Good morning to you again. Honestly, I liked your presentation, your radio, the whole hour there. I kind of wanted to see what your thoughts on having another Bill Clinton in office, because honestly, from what you've told me and what I've heard from you, you seem to have done a lot better than these, your Republicans that seem to go up in our deficits, like Ronald Reagan. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of history in that where he lowered taxes, but the deficit went up in some of these Republican people. Can you explain to that a little bit and maybe give your insights on that, sir?
I can. Do you happen to have a copy of the Constitution of the United States handy?
I probably could, but
well, I've got one right here, and I can help you. What I'm looking for here is something very basic. If you look at the Constitution, the first thing you see is the preamble. You know, we the people. Article 1, Section 1. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. And the first article is all about Congress and what Congress, what authority Congress has, etc., etc. Article 2 sets up the executive branch and the presidency. The point I'm making here is that the framers of our Constitution and our Constitution itself essentially set Congress up to be the place where, well, for example, the taxes are raised and the money is spent, which is the biggest thing in government. Now, you were talking a few moments ago about when the budget was balanced and when the deficit went up, and et cetera, et cetera. And I would suggest that it is more important than looking at who was in the White House. You might look at who was running Congress. I would submit to you that if President Reagan, Bill Clinton lost Congress 2 years into his administration. In 1994, Republicans swept the House and Senate. They put Bob Dole in as Senate Majority Leader. Newt Gingrich became House Speaker. And it was those people who succeeded in making the adjustments to spending and taxes that eventually brought the budget into balance. Wouldn't it have been wonderful? This is something I've thought about, so I'm glad you raised the question. Wouldn't it have been wonderful if just for 1 year or one term, 2 years out of the 8, if Ronald Reagan had had a Republican Congress? It never happened. Not even once. 2 landslide election victories, but in both of them, people still persisted in electing Democratic majorities to the House of Representatives. Now, there were a number of reasons for this. Long-term entrenched Democratic incumbents, many Democrats who went back to their districts and talked like conservatives, but when they went back to Washington, who'd they elect Speaker? Tip O'Neill. So, people essentially misleading their voters. Well, gosh, politicians misleading their voters. Imagine that. Such a thing. Yep, it happens. So, Reagan, you say, lowered taxes, the deficit expanded. Well, I'll tell you what. Reagan was fighting a war. His overarching goal in office was to defeat the Soviet Union. And to that end, he raised military spending. During the Reagan administration, we were spending 6% of GDP on our Defense Department. That's double what we're spending right now. Now, the idea wasn't to go to war. The idea was essentially to break the Russian bank. And that's what happened. When the Soviet Union fell apart, it wasn't because they'd been bombed and shelled and invaded. No, it was because their finances completely fell apart. The wheels fell off. Now, following that, of course, that didn't happen until Reagan had been out of office for a year or so, but it happened. And once again, Reagan wasn't in office to see and reap the benefits of his policies. The Soviet Union didn't fall until 1990, 1991. The budget didn't come into balance until 1997. But these were Reagan accomplishments, Republican accomplishments. And so far as Bill Clinton is concerned, I would remind you, there's a reason why 2 years into his administration, the American people voted his party out of Congress. It was because Mr. Clinton was elected on basically a conservative platform. End welfare as we know it. A tax cut for the middle class. He didn't deliver on any of that. By the time he got inaugurated, 2 months after the election, his tax cut had turned into a tax increase. People criticize Donald Trump for lying, for saying things that aren't true. Hell, Bill Clinton could have given Trump lying lessons. Bill Clinton was possibly the most accomplished prevaricator we've ever had in the White House. And, people say, well, to be a good politician, you have to be a good liar. Well, I guess by that definition, Bill Clinton was a hell of a politician. Real good liar. He made people want to believe him. And you're asking, do we need another Bill Clinton? Good God, no.
Well, I guess just in general, do you think we need another Democrat in office? I know you're a hardcore Republican, it sounds like, but from what I read, I don't want to question some of these economic data from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, shows GDP growth under Democrats slightly outpacing Republicans.
A meaningless statistic when it comes to administrative quality. For one thing, there's a delay. I mentioned a while ago, Reagan's policies did not bear fruit until after he'd left office. And as a result, who gets credit for the balanced budget? Bill Clinton. That was a Reagan accomplishment. Because after the Cold War ended and we could once again reduce our military expenditure, that was part of the recipe that went into balancing the budget. No, in the last hour, I made the point, and I made it often, we cannot afford to ever have another Democrat win the presidency. We've already had Mr. Biden. This is a taste of what a Democratic administration looks like. I would commend to your attention, you know where Real Clear Politics is, you go there every day. Look at, in the Federalist, this is down towards the bottom of today's posts, Biden was never fit for office. And this asks essentially the same question I was asking about an hour ago. Who was running the country during the Biden administration when Mr. Biden was not capable of doing so, was mentally reduced? And we find some of these names here. We find, let me see, who were these people? Jeffrey Zients, Chief of Staff. White House Counsel Ed Siskel. I've never heard of these people. Nobody's ever voted for them. And yet they were the ones who essentially ran the auto pen and made decisions on a day-to-day basis. Mr. Biden, when confronted with a question about why he had cut off natural gas exports, said, I never did that. Somebody did, because that executive order was published and went into effect. Mr. Biden says he didn't do it. Some Democrat in his administration made sure.
Well, I find it interesting. Well, I apologize. No, I find it interesting where it seems like most of what you're saying is the reason why Reagan seemed to not have been the great because he went into war. Is that what you're suggesting? Some of these Republicans that have been in office have been in war, I guess, and that's why they didn't do too great in what they needed to do as far as getting the budget in order.
That was W's big problem. I mean, his dad had set him up for failure. You've never heard me. I'm a Republican, but I have never been very high on anybody named Bush. You've listened to the program long enough to know that. George Sr. said, okay, we've got to put Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait, his invasion and occupation of that country, impermissible, puts together this magnificent international coalition, actually has them paying for our war effort. Quite an accomplishment. And then at the end, he snatches defeat from the jaws of victory by not taking Saddam Hussein out, removing him from power. So Saddam continues to wreak havoc for another 10 years. Finally, W decides, well, I've got to finish the job that Dad didn't do. And instead of simply taking him out and then finding and putting up another dictator, a dictator friendly to us and who would be an ally of ours, he says, we're going to turn Iraq into a democracy. We're going to improvise. We're going to impose Western-style Enlightenment politics on an essentially tribal society. A fool's errand. This is Woodrow Wilson in action. Yes, we'll bring democracy everywhere. In a pig's eye, you will. And so we get bogged down in that. Years are wasted. A few lives are wasted. A tremendous amount of money is wasted. And most important of all, the American people's patience is exhausted. And it's hard to blame them. When you set out to do something that can't be done, sooner or later people lose patience with you and your foolishness.
No, I find it hard to blame, honestly, these presidents that are getting into war. I don't blame Reagan by any means, but I just don't think...
you keep talking... Wait a second. You keep talking about Reagan and war. Look, and I got it. Okay, well, the Bushes took us into these wars. What war did Reagan get us into, please?
Well, didn't you just say he had wasn't he in some form of war? Maybe I got that wrong. I apologize.
Oh, God. I said that Reagan's...
But anyway...
No. Shut up and listen. This taxes my patience all to hell and God. I'm going to say this in words of one syllable. Try to surround it. I'm sorry for losing my patience, but this is just so dreadful. I made the point that Ronald Reagan's entire presidency was devoted toward defeating the Soviet Union. Now, hopefully you're aware of the fact that Ronald Reagan did not go to war with the Soviet Union. We never went to war with Russia. We never fought that huge cataclysm. It didn't happen. Reagan did succeed in defeating the Soviet Union, but not by going to war. Now, I put it to you that if you have a tremendous conflict with another superpower and you manage to win it without going to war, that you've really accomplished something pretty great. But you keep talking about Reagan going to war, and I keep saying, what are you talking about? And I don't understand. Try and explain that to me. Reagan, what?
No, I apologize for any of your listeners, and I apologize for you. Yeah, you're 100% correct on that point, no doubt. Let me switch gears real quick. I did send you an article yesterday, just for your listeners in Capitola. I guess there's a meeting tomorrow, 6 p.m. I guess the meeting is for that Regional Transportation Commission, talking about the mobile home parks. So it seemed like some of your callers were interested in that topic, and I figured I'd let your listeners know and yourself. Yeah, again, tomorrow, I think it's at 6 p.m., Capitola City Council is having that meeting. So just pointing that out there, sir. So I appreciate it for your time, and you have a great rest of your show, sir. And I apologize for screwing the Reagan thing up. No, you're 100% correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. And you have a great rest of your day. Have a good one, Charles. Bye-bye.
Okay. I actually do deal with people who, they'll try to tell you, Reagan started wars. Where, obviously, evidence isn't coming from there. Thank you. Appreciate that. And also appreciate his using the program as a platform to alert people to upcoming public meetings. Capitola City Council, and they're looking into this issue concerning a right-of-way for the boutique railroad. We had some callers on this the other day. It was a topic that a few people called in and wanted to talk about, and so we did. And we learned that there's a dispute amounting to 4, 5, 6 feet of right-of-way along the tracks that go through Capitola and through some other communities, through Live Oak. There's a question of whether adverse possession can be claimed on this. I had one of my listeners sent me a thing and said, no, adverse possession, you can't claim that against the government. And if this is, I don't know whether it's government land or not. You see, it's up until recently, it was owned by the railroad company, the Southern Pacific, which became Union Pacific. It was purchased a few years back by the government, the county government, which, at the time I thought that was a terrible idea, but nevertheless, they didn't ask me, so they went ahead and did that. And now the Santa Cruz County government, which is noted for its efficiency and its clarity of operation and its goodness and cleanness of everything, now they own a railroad. If that doesn't make you want to laugh, I've got a sense of humor. To me, that sounds funny. Santa Cruz County now owns a railroad. The problem is, it's kind of like, what was it Lincoln said? It hurts too much to laugh, and I'm too old to cry. Another phrase that comes up, Santa Cruz County owns a railroad. What could go wrong? And obviously at that point, you begin filling entire books with possibilities. So, 6 o'clock tomorrow, we learn, is the time of this meeting. Capitola City Council chambers, in the shadow of the giant trestle. So, if you are concerned in this, and obviously people who live in these dwellings that are along there, they're up in arms. And I certainly don't blame them. I mean, they have their homes there. Many of them lived there for not years, but decades. And now all of a sudden somebody comes along and says, well, we're going to shave 6 or 8 feet off your parcel here. But part of my dwelling, part of my house is on that. Tough, move it. Or we'll just take a chainsaw to it. This is an object lesson, incidentally, for those people who are always complaining about corporate power, the evil corporations. Corporation couldn't get away with this. Just a few seconds ago, we were talking about that issue of adverse possession. If say an entity like a railroad, a corporation, owns property, but for decades, you've been acting as if that property were yours. You built a fence there, and you have your house is partially on that land, and you've been living there, minding your own business for 10, 15, 20 years. At that position, at that time, if the railroad says, oh, we're going to put something there and we have to have that land, you could go into court and claim adverse possession. You could say, hey, they haven't, I've been using that land, had it fenced off, living on it for X amount of years, and they never said a word. And that doctrine of adverse possession actually is a real thing in court. But if the owner of the land is the government, that goes away. And that was the point. I believe it was Malcolm who sent me a thing on this adverse possession. I couldn't remember the term, and he kindly reminded me adverse possession is the term. And he also said this doesn't apply if the entity is a government entity. So once again, for all you leftists out there who are always so upset about corporate power, hey, if it were corporate, these people and their homes, they'd have legal redress. The question now is, will they be able to go into court and claim, well, the railroad owned that property for X number of years, and during that period of time, we had our dwellings here and our fences here and our yards here and our homes here. And in other words, kind of an ex post facto adverse possession. Is that even possible? Or would the county simply come in and claim, well, when we bought that property from the railroad, that now becomes our property, and any adverse possession claim you had, well, we're the government, and we don't care. We don't have to. Government power, state power, is what to fear. Not corporate power. No corporation can force you to buy its wares or do business with it or have anything to do with it. The government will come after you. And you've seen it happen in your life. Okay, it's 10:30. Let's grab an ad package, and we'll be back in 6 minutes. 2 minutes.
The Hook is California's first ever cannabis outlet. 100% locally owned and operated, we're here to be your friendly neighborhood hookup. We believe that everyone should have access to fairly priced cannabis, so we work hard to get it to you for 30 to 50% less than the other guys. If you're 21 or older with a valid ID, visit us in Capitola or in Watsonville today. We're here to be your friendly neighborhood hookup. Check out our website, hookoutlet.com, for deals and stay groovy.
Hello, I'm Carolyn. 25 years ago, my husband Rudy and I opened Charlie Hong Kong with the commitment to serve healthy food grown in healthy soil. Today, the healthy food we serve comes from the sacred land in Pajaro Valley, where Dick Peugeot and his Lakeside Organics grow the soil, and the soil grows the healthy plant that we serve to you. When you eat at Charlie Hong Kong, you eat healthy food, and it's delicious. Charlie Hong Kong, Santa Cruz.
Tomatoes, carrots, radishes, onions, squash, watermelon, all things we must eat regularly to survive. Hi folks, Warren Knox here. Wouldn't it be great to just walk out your front or back door and right there you can pick pesticide and chemical-free food that you grew? You could do just that with a Knox Garden Box, a heavily constructed, elevated garden box that will allow you to grow just about any vegetable or flower there is. Sold assembled or unassembled, shipped worldwide. The therapy of gardening is just a call away. You can find your Knox Garden Box built in Scotts Valley, California, or log on to www.knoxgardenbox.com. Our staff will answer any questions on gardening, so if you don't have a green thumb, believe we can see that you do. Okay, phone number to call is 831-461-0634. Thanks, folks.
10:30 on a Wednesday morning. I'm Charles. Is it Wednesday? Yeah, Wednesday morning. I'm Charles Freedman. Welcome to the program, 831-265-5050. I've got to admit, I've still got some steam coming out of my ears on that. Yeah, Reagan's wars. And in all fairness to Evan, he said, no, I understand. You know, there were no Reagan's wars, but this was the constant drumbeat. Reagan is a warmonger. Reagan is a warmonger. Reagan is a warmonger. You don't want Reagan to launch World War III. He wants to blow up the world. All of that was the standard Democratic boilerplate through 8 solid years of Reagan's administration. Reagan wants war. Reagan, earlier, I mentioned this occasionally. I'll mention it again. Before Reagan went into politics, during the period of time when he was contemplating running for governor, he was introduced to former President Dwight Eisenhower, who was living in retirement at that time. And Reagan cultivated Eisenhower's company. He looked at Eisenhower as a mentor. Here was a man who had, during a very difficult period of time, not only kept the country at peace, he ended the Korean War within a few months of coming to office, and for the remainder of his term, America remained at peace. And Eisenhower told him this is one of the reasons, probably the main reason why Americans still regard me so highly. By the time his administration was over, Eisenhower was being ridiculed for being boring. Boring is good. Boring means nobody's getting shot at. Warfare is exciting. Peace is boring. I'll take boring every time. And this was the kind of thing that Eisenhower told Reagan, that he regarded keeping America at peace as one of the most important things he had to do. The other was to keep America's economy prosperous and growing. A prosperous country does not need to indulge in adventures. Peace and prosperity. A winning ticket every time. This was what Reagan learned from Eisenhower. And during his 8 years as president, Reagan was able, first of all, to restore economic prosperity. By the time he'd been in office for 2 years, we were in the depths of a terrible recession that had been caused by the measures necessary to pull us out of an inflationary spiral that had begun during the Johnson administration. Reagan confronted economic problems that had been bothering the country through 5 presidential administrations. Let me see, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Carter. 4 presidential administrations. And by the time he ran for re-election, after 4 years in the White House, he ran on a theme of morning in America. The sun is coming up. It's springtime. It's wonderful. Everything is great. You can't tell people that if they don't see it in their own communities. Joe Biden actually tried that. He remembered Reagan. He said, oh, yeah, Bidenomics is working. Everything's great. The response was a general because people looked around themselves in their own communities and they didn't see it. If you're going to try a, hey, things are great campaign, things had better be great, or you won't get away with it. Running that kind of a campaign, Reagan took 49 states and the biggest electoral landslide in the history of the country. But even then, Democrats continued to control the House of Representatives. And the House of Representatives is, in terms of fiscal policy, the more important of the 2 houses of Congress. Did you know that? We think of the Senate and the House, 2 houses of Congress, equal. Not entirely. The House and Senate are different. One represents the people. That's the people's house. That's the House of Representatives. The other represents the states. Now, that's valuable, too. But the framers regarded the House of Representatives, because it represented the people directly, as the more important of the 2. And that is why the Constitution specifies that spending bills and tax bills must originate in the House. The Senate cannot originate a tax bill. Sideline for a second. I said a few minutes ago we could never elect another Democrat. One of the signature accomplishments of President Obama was his Affordable Health Care Act, which came to be known as Obamacare. When this was proposed, the bill originally came out of the Senate, but bear in mind, when it went to the Supreme Court and was upheld as constitutional, the logic behind that, well, this is a tax bill, and the Congress has the power to tax. But if it's a tax bill, then the fact that it came out of the Senate means that the entire thing was conceived and approved illegally, because a tax bill can't come out of the Senate. It has to come out of the House. So with the Democrats, it's always perversion of process in one way or another. They don't really care how something gets done as long as what they want done gets done and stays done, whether it's a good idea or not. Yesterday we talked briefly about the Department of Education. Mr. Trump is dedicated to the idea of abolishing the Department of Education. He can't do it. Why? Because the Democrats in Congress will stand united against it. Why do they want this? The Department of Education has obviously been a failure. There is no conceivable logical reason for continuing to spend billions of dollars on it. That money could better be either spent on something else, or, hey, we could take a huge cut off of our deficit. All of the people in the Department of Education, nice people, let them go out and get other jobs doing more productive things, working at institutions and organizations that actually produce good results and that benefit the country, instead of the Department of Education, which produces only paperwork, red tape, nonsense, and less literate children. But the Democrats want it, and so it remains. And Again, if there is ever another Democrat in the White House, what will happen with the Department of Education? Like a balloon that's been deflated, it'll be reflated. Billions of dollars will be poured into the Department of Education. A lot of left-wing morons will be hired at good government salaries to go about, once again, the business of interfering in and reducing the effectiveness of local schools from coast to coast. A bad idea, a bad product. That's what the Democrats are in the business of. And time after time, this is made clear. And yet, very few people on the Republican side are actually willing to come along and say, "Hey, this is a waste of time. Let's knock it off." It took guts for Donald Trump to propose getting rid of the Department of Education. Reagan proposed it too. He also proposed getting rid of the Department of Energy. I remember him saying, here we have, $80 billion being spent in the Department of Energy, and they haven't produced any energy at all. All they produced is red tape, bureaucracy. They're a brake on energy. They do not facilitate energy, they impede it. Therefore, we would do better without them. Again, the Democratic House of Representatives wasn't about to approve a measure to reduce government. Democrats are not about the business of reducing government. People occasionally come up with statements, well, there's really no difference between the two major parties. Sometimes they can show what seems to be a case, but when it comes to the basic issue, how big should government be? What ought it to do or not do? It is there that you can see a real difference between Republicans and Democrats, a real difference between a party of the right and a party of the left. Republicans are skeptical of government. They understand that government generally does not do things all that well. And so they would like government to remain in its lane, essentially do the things that government is supposed to do, and leave other things to other people. People in the private sector who operate either for profit motives or for altruistic reasons to accomplish things that the government does not do that well, i.e. run schools, i.e. provide energy. So, I'm seeing a phone call coming in. Oh, great. We got plenty of time. Excellent. Let's go ahead and take the call. Hi there.
Well, you're very quick there. You're real quick there, Charles. I appreciate it. This is Evan again. Hopefully you'll have some other callers here, that 265-5050. But anyway, I wanted to kind of question you on a few things.
Sure.
About Reagan one more time, if that's all right.
Of course.
Granted, he seemed like he had a lot of wars. He did have where it was into. Granted, you did say he was in the dealing with the Soviet Union, and then Grenada came into play, didn't it?
I was just about to say, name me one war that took place on Reagan's administration, and you have put your finger on the only one. And
I'm sorry, Lebanon.
That was a.
And then there was a Libya.
Okay, let's go into these one by one. First of all, Grenada is a small Caribbean island which was essentially targeted for takeover by Fidel Castro. A group of 6 heads of state from Caribbean republics. I remember in particular there was a lady from Dominica who had a majestic presence. Anyway, these 6 Caribbean leaders came to President Reagan and said, listen, Castro is taking over Grenada. We can't do anything about it. Will you please help? And at that time there was I believe it was a medical school or something like that, some kind of an educational facility on Grenada that a significant number of Americans were attending. So on the pretext of guaranteeing the safety of these American citizens, Reagan authorized U.S. forces to stage an invasion. When they got there and they took over the island, they discovered that indeed the supplies and the infrastructure for an invasion and occupation by Castro were all there. So the representations that these Caribbean heads of state had made were all true. The people of Grenada rejoiced in having been saved from this, and if to this day, if you visit Grenada, which is a popular tourist destination, you will find that the airport where you land is Reagan International Airfield. Now, that was the only war, and now, as I said, it was over rather quickly because Grenada is a very small island, but that was the only war that Reagan got us into. You spoke about Lebanon and Libya. In Lebanon, Mr. Reagan was operating as all presidents in the post-war era have, trying to balance and coerce peace out of people in a region of the world that is just almost impossible. Reagan made a mistake in sending 300 Marines to Lebanon. This is one time he didn't pay attention to Eisenhower. There was a time in 1955 or 56 when Eisenhower sent U.S. forces to Lebanon. He sent something like 50,000, with the result that peace broke out. When all of a sudden you look around, you see this massive military presence, you kind of grow peaceful. Reagan ignored that lesson. Well, he wasn't a general, and Eisenhower was. He sent these 300 Marines who then were blown up in a terror attack. Some 250 of them, 242, I can't remember the exact number. Anyway, these were killed. This was the worst day of the Reagan administration. And I remember when he was leaving office, Barbara Walters was interviewing him, and she said, Mr. Reagan, do you, it's been a good 8 years, do you have any regrets? And he immediately said, I got 242 Marines killed. I live with that every day. I regret it every day. That was unquestionably the worst thing that happened during my administration. Insofar as Libya is concerned, at that time, Muammar Gaddafi was a leading state sponsor of terror and had blown up an aircraft over Lockerbie, Scotland, had caused a massacre in a German nightclub in which both events American citizens had died. President Reagan, let's be gentle and say, kind of lost patience with Mr. Gaddafi, and he ordered an airstrike with the idea of getting Mr. Gaddafi's attention. And indeed, he succeeded in doing that. The airstrike almost killed Gaddafi. They found out where he was and sent aircraft over, dropped some bombs, and that was the end of it. This was the beginning, really, of a kind of metamorphosis, which over a period of the next few years led Gaddafi to wind up in the early 2000s voluntarily discontinuing his weapons of mass destruction program. What Saddam Hussein had been asked to do, turn over your atomic energy program and allow inspections, Gaddafi did that. And then he was repaid with perfidy when Barack Obama and his Secretary of State Hillary Clinton decided, well, let's overthrow Gaddafi. They were the ones who sponsored a change of regime in Libya, which replaced Gaddafi, who at that time had become basically a Western client, replaced him with a failed state. That, of all the international moves taken by the Obama administration, that was perhaps the most stupid and counterproductive. But you never know why Mr. Obama does things. You know, here was a guy who cited, maybe the Ayatollah told him to do it. I don't know. At any rate, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Please, go for it.
Well, I was just going to get back to your original question about Reagan's 3 acts. So there was a bombing raid against Gaddafi. There was essentially a mission of rescue and mercy in Grenada, and a terrible, terrible disaster in Lebanon. I wouldn't, none of those measure up to what, George W. Bush got us into in Iraq or Afghanistan. None of those measure up to what Bill Clinton got us into in Bosnia. So Mr. Reagan, I would submit to you, was really pretty good at keeping the peace. That was the rule rather than the exception during his administration.
No, I find it interesting. History's great. You're a very great history teacher. I appreciate it for years listening to you, sir. Granted, I think we all have, some of us have some issues when it comes to these wars. Congressional approval. I read that he didn't seem to have any congressional approval on one of these things. Let me go ahead and real quick. Congressional under constitutional. Yeah, the Constitution granted that we have that. And then I guess Lebanon. Let me see here. U.S. troops were deployed for sure in Lebanon, which I probably don't agree with. But I guess I guess that happened. How long? It wasn't very long of a war, from what I was reading.
Well, it wasn't a war at all. It was a massacre. It was a terror attack. And when that occurred, Mr. Reagan withdrew what was left of the force, and that was the end of that.
Okay, and then the congressional approval. Congress did not formally declare war on past authorization for use of military force for Lebanon. However, in September 1983, Congress passed Force in Lebanon resolution. So that was kind of interesting. You probably know more about that than I do, but no, I appreciate it for the history lesson. I just kind of wanted to kind of get into that a little bit more because, honestly, I feel like a little. You went into a little bit too much wars, but we could probably argue that to the cows come home. But you probably have other callers.
Are you saying that? Are you saying that, in your view, President Reagan entered into too many wars? Is that what I heard you say?
I think so.
Really?
I guess so. I think I'm going to end with that possibly, and maybe we'll have some other discussions later on.
So, in your view, then, you're going to take the Tucker Carlson approach. You're going to say that no president should ever indulge in any kind of military activity ever, anywhere, under any circumstances, unless the United States is directly attacked or unless there's a congressional declaration of war. And we haven't had a congressional declaration of war
exactly
since 1941.
Exactly. I find myself more independent or more to deal with our Constitution more. Well, I'm a constitutionalist, sir.
Well, presidents long before Reagan, President Washington led a force into western Pennsylvania to put down the Whiskey Rebellion. Matter of fact, it was a larger force than he ever headed during the Revolutionary War. American presidents, there was no declaration of war when Jefferson sent the United States Navy and Marines to confront the Barbary pirates who were seizing American ships and impressing American crews into slavery. Mr. Jefferson sent the Navy and Marines to deal with that. There was no declaration of war from Congress. So there is ample precedent for the President of the United States acting as Commander-in-Chief, using the U.S. military, President Wilson dispatched the military into Mexico to chase Pancho Villa. Now, you can argue how smart a move that was, but it was done. During the 1920s, Marines were sent to Haiti and Nicaragua on a couple of occasions for the purpose of defending American interests there that were on the verge of being overtaken and seized. President Eisenhower sent 50,000 troops to Lebanon in 1956. There was no declaration of war. So if you're going to take that ground, bear in mind that you're taking a ground that is very, very marginal in terms of the historical justification for it. You see what I'm saying?
I don't think it's marginal when you're a constitutionalist. I would think you're a very strong person on your First Amendment and possibly your Second Amendment too. That's why I have a lot of military friends. I find you very interesting. You're a military vet. You all swore an oath to the Constitution. If you don't feel like the Constitution's correct, there's amendments that happen. Do I agree with those when it comes to these First and Second Amendments? No. I feel like we're being taken advantage of by these, possible warmongers, if you want to call them that. I don't feel like some of these wars were justified based off of the fact that if you are a constitutionalist, you don't want to be look like as a hypocrite, and so you want to find yourself more on the constitutional side, in which you've pointed out many times before.
Well, in all fairness, when presidents have wanted to indulge in lengthy military maneuvers, for example, when Lyndon Johnson wanted to go to Vietnam, he went to Congress and got the Gulf of Tonkin resolution approved, which essentially granted him congressional authorization to do what he did there. When both Junior and Senior Bush wanted to embark on military activity in the Middle East, there were very serious debates and serious votes undertaken in Congress, and if those votes had not approved those actions, they probably wouldn't have happened, because neither Bush Sr. nor Bush Jr., for all their faults, neither of them were interested in proceeding with anything that did not have congressional approval. In the case of, let me ask you about this one, for example. Mr. Trump recently conducted a bombing raid against Iran, which succeeded in reducing their nuclear capabilities and essentially changed the equation there. Under the law, this did not require congressional authorization because it did not take 60 days, or it was simply a presidential action. Do you believe that this was an unconstitutional act on Mr. Trump's part?
If he didn't need congressional approval, then by all means. If he's not breaking the law, so to speak, then go for it. I'm all for that. I don't want any of our presidents breaking any laws or breaking our constitutional laws, which are very framed out perfectly.
Well, none of the things that we cited by President Reagan, for example, none of those violated law in any way. The only one that required any congressional authorization was the Lebanon thing, and you pointed out that I had forgotten about that Congress actually did vote an authorization for that. So
that sounds great for me. But anyway, I appreciate it. You got about 2 minutes left. I thank you so much for the conversation. It went a little bit more than I expected.
That's
so
all right.
hopefully you'll have some other callers.
This is why I always urge you and other callers to call early in the hour, because conversations of this sort acquire, and go in various directions. And I like to be able to take that time. I don't want to tell a caller, well, I'm sorry, I'm out of time, go away. I'd rather continue the conversation so that we can explore things as far as we need to.
And granted, I don't like calling too much. I'd rather have a lot more other callers call in. You seem to have a lot of great callers that can call in, so I appreciate it. You got about a minute left, so I'll give it to you. Thank you again, Charles. Bye-bye.
Have a great day. Yeah, there are, I don't know. The Congress has passed the War Powers Act, which I don't know if it's constitutional or not. It's never been tested. Presidents since Nixon, Ford, whoever it was, have all said that they did not feel bound by it and they did not regard it as constitutional, but they have all observed it in practice. So, go figure. At any rate, the idea that President Reagan conducted a lot of wars, I will admit this is the first time I've heard anybody come up with that since the actual Reagan administration, when everybody was talking not about what Reagan had done, but what he was going to do. He's going to do this, going to do that. And of course, it never happened. And people who said it would wound up looking kind of foolish. But Democrats looking foolish is something that I've grown accustomed to over my life. It is 11 o'clock. I'll be back in 6 minutes with hour number 3.
In 1924, President Calvin Coolidge spoke to a group of business owners. Unfortunately, the federal government has strayed far afield from its legitimate business, he told them. It has trespassed upon fields where there should be no trespass. If it was trespass then, today it's grand larceny. By 1930, government spending at all levels, federal, state, and local, was just 12% of America's economic output. By 2020, it was 45%. And it's not just spending. The Federal Register, the list of all federal regulations, grew from 2,600 pages in 1936 to 90,000 in 2023. Administration after administration, decade after decade, the U.S. government just keeps getting bigger. Why? Proponents of bigger government say that as America's challenges grow, the only entity that can meet these challenges is the government. Are they right? Let's consider 3 major areas of spending: education, healthcare, and social welfare. Education comprises about 14% of all government spending. From 1966 to 2016, adjusted for inflation, spending per student nearly tripled, from $4,700 to almost $14,000. Has student performance nearly tripled? Nope. Math and reading scores have barely budged, and SAT performance hasn't improved at all. On a state-by-state basis, it's even worse. California spends $24,000 per student, and its K-12 performance is 37th in the nation. Chicago has doubled its school spending since 2012 to $29,000 per student, and test scores have plummeted. Only 1 in 4 students can read or do math at grade level. Now let's consider Medicaid, health care for the poor, which costs about $800 billion in 2022, or over 8% of all government expenditures. That's a lot of money. Is it making poor Americans healthier? In a 2013 paper in the New England Journal of Medicine, researchers studied the expansion of Medicaid coverage for low-income adults in Oregon. They found that Medicaid coverage generated no significant improvements in physical health outcomes. The results are also disappointing for the federal welfare programs that comprise America's broad social safety net. These programs make up more than 20% of all government spending. In 2022, the federal government spent $9,000 per household on 80 different welfare programs. But these programs, in addition to mind-blowing costs, have all sorts of unintended consequences. For example, Americans have been famous for their mobility, their eagerness to follow opportunity wherever it takes them. But a 2018 Yale Law School study found that welfare programs often discourage low-income people from relocating to find better-paying jobs. Why? Because they don't want to lose the benefits they're getting in their state. To recap, 41% of government spending goes to an education system that hasn't made us smarter, a healthcare system that hasn't made us healthier, and a welfare system that hasn't made us more prosperous. Maybe money isn't the problem. Maybe government isn't the answer. There is one more big factor to consider. All this non-productive government spending has landed us deeply in debt. In 2024, the U.S. federal government's debt surpassed $35 trillion. The interest on that debt will surpass our entire defense budget in 2024. And that's not a static number. It keeps growing. The big government crowd that dug this hole has an answer for how to climb out. Tax the rich. Let's see what would happen if we did. A Cato Institute study considered what would happen if the government taxed 100% of all earnings above $500,000. Putting aside the absurdity of such an action, the study found that we would still be $200 billion short of covering the federal budget. And that assumes people wouldn't change their behavior in response to such confiscatory taxes. Why would anybody try to make a lot of money if they couldn't keep it? There is a way out of this mess, but it will take a change of mindset. We don't have to look back as far as Coolidge to get us on the right path, just to Ronald Reagan. Here's what he said. Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. For America's first 160 years, until President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal, the government played a remarkably modest role in Americans' lives, and the nation prospered. The world had never seen anything like it. Even as the government has ballooned over the past 9 decades, it has not been able to stamp out Americans' knack for ingenuity and innovation. But at some point, something will have to give. No great civilization has survived the enormous levels of debt that the U.S. government is now assuming. Why would we be different? I'm Joshua Rao, professor of finance at Stanford and senior fellow at the Hoover Institution for Prager University.
I may just play that on the program. That is really an incredibly valuable little synthesis. Might be a good thing to open the program with in this third hour. I think I'll do that. Okay. Oh, come on. Oh, dear. Okay, welcome back. It is 11:06. I'm Charles Freedman. Thank you very much for being with me on this Wednesday edition of the Charles Freedman radio program on SantaCruzVoice.com. It is time once again to give the telephone number. Make sure everybody knows where to call to get on the program. Evan has given us a couple of buzzes today. Love to hear from somebody else. 831-265-5050 is the telephone number. 831-265-5050. I have, I just happened to look at the, what am I trying to say? I don't know if we had a top of the hour break or not. I know we were supposed to, but from what I'm looking at here, it looks as if it may have continued with me right through the top of the hour. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at stream time. Yeah, that did happen. Okay, so I'm going to presume that everybody just heard the little presentation from PragerU that I played during the break, which would normally, of course, have only gone on to the podcast. But seeing as how that's already been aired, we will move on to other things. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about the new approach by Mr. Putin, or pardon me, by Mr. Trump to Mr. Putin and Russia and Ukraine, etc. The fact that Trump now seems to have, well, what do I want to say? He now seems inclined to put additional pressure on the Russian dictator in the interest of securing the peace, which I am convinced he is genuinely interested in. This is one thing that that I don't question. I never have questioned. Mr. Trump says he wants peace. I believe he does. I believe he does. I believe that he was essentially proving that when he bombed the living daylights out of Iran's nuclear program. If you want peace, sitting in a puddle of your own urine and whining about it is one thing. Being willing to actually take actions to defend and promote peace is another thing. The greatest man of peace of the 20th century was Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill was a man who made war more than once. In what interest did he do so? To defend the legitimate prerogatives of his nation and to return to a condition of peace. This is the only valid reason for fighting. So are you saying, Charles, that you would fight for peace? Absolutely. Absolutely. If you think it's valuable and worthwhile, then you are willing to fight for it. Just as you would fight for anything that you believe to be genuinely worthwhile. That's the test. So Mr. Trump is a man of peace and has shown himself to be so by being willing to act in the interest of peace. Now we see him essentially confronted by a man who is a man of war. And this is what Mr. Trump, I think, is having, to be gentle, I think he's having trouble coming to grips with it. Mr. Putin evidently, I've never met the fellow or talked with him, but he's evidently capable of projecting a rather comforting aura. I'm reminded of a time years ago when George W. Bush actually invited Putin not merely to the White House. He wasn't merely his guest at the White House. No, Putin got the invitation to George W. Bush's ranch in Texas. He got a George W. Bush nickname. And he also got the accolade. I've looked into this man's eyes and seen I can't remember what his exact words were, but something rather effusive and ethereal and dead wrong. Hillary Clinton hit a reset button with Putin's Russia. Barack Obama in 2016 was caught assuring the placeholder president of Russia at that time, when you get back to Moscow, tell Vladimir that after the election I'll be able to be more flexible. This is what Putin likes to hear. He wants the people he's confronting to be more flexible because he likes to bend them right around his finger. Right now, he would like Ukraine to be more flexible. Ukraine is proving itself inflexible, unwilling to cave in, unwilling to knuckle under. And helped in its resistance by the United States of America, the leader of the free world, and by the European community of like-minded nations. This is as it should be. And the fact that so many in America and in Western Europe complain about having other people fight their war for them, wow. Seems like we'd be absolutely down on our hands and knees thanking the Ukrainians, because if it weren't Ukraine right now bearing the brunt of Russian arms, it would be somebody else. Mr. Putin has made the claim that wherever Russian boots have touched the ground, that is Russian territory. If you look at where Russian boots were touching the ground in the years after World War II, you will find that not only was Ukraine under the Russian yoke, so were the Baltic republics, so were the so-called satellite nations of Eastern Europe, Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic, Romania, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia. and of course, half of Germany. So Mr. Putin, evidently, in his fondest dreams, would like to see all of that restored. Mark's on the line. Let's find out what is on his mind. Says something about, INS raids. Let's learn something. Mark's always very educational. Hello, sir. Welcome.
Hey, Charlie. You know, in the media last week, they had much about the INS raids on Glass House cannabis farms down in Ventura County. And huge raid. But, and again, the governor, Newsom, stuck his nose in it and was condemning the INS, condemning the Trump administration. When you look at what happened down there, that farm operation, the cannabis farm, had a large proportion of illegal immigrants as labor.
From what I heard, it was not just illegal immigrants; it was actually minors.
They had minors there also, so that's illegal. So what they did was pretty much, by the book as far as the raid on the farms, and the people they took away were not supposed to be here. And everything with the farm too, then it puts it in a position as a commercial operation. They have an unfair economic labor advantage. They're probably not paying those people the rate that they should be, or they'd pay for green card holders or citizens in working on those farms. So I thought Newsom came out looking pretty bad, criticizing the Trump administration and then defending this operation. Again, I think you hit the major point that they had people under 18 years old working there. Well, I don't know if you heard or not, today out on San John Road, they shut the road down. They're south of Watsonville. And there was a Sikorsky Black Hawk helicopter, a 60 series, circling all morning long over that area of, just east of Popro. And everyone was speculating, giant INS raid, ICE, all the activists got out there ready to protest ICE and the whole thing. And it turned out it was part of an operation by the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office. And what was out there was an illegal cannabis operation, and they went and raided it. And it was not immigration. It was the illegal cannabis farm.
Wait a second.
And I don't know why San Bernardino.
Wait a second. Are you sure it was it San Benito County or San Bernardino County?
San Bernardino, down South California.
Well, now, I'm aware of the fact that San Bernardino County is the largest county in the United States. Over 20,000 square miles, you could fit all of southern New England into San Bernardino County. But I'll confess, I didn't know that it got that close to us. What in the hell is going on, Mark?
Well, I'm sure there must be a tie-in with some operation down in that county where they got a warrant to come up to our county, or Monterey County, and serve.
Whoop! What happened?
Come out.
Okay, good.
But
you faded out for just a second. You faded out for just a second there. Could you back up about 15 seconds? Repeat yourself, please.
Yeah, it was San Bernardino County, and I'm sure they got some sort of legal warrant to come up here and perform this police action, and it must be tied into something, some operation down in their county, and they must have gotten the approval of the local sheriff to come up here to this county.
Okay.
But that all went down this morning, but I do not have the total information there. But the big thing is not an immigration raid. It's not an ICE raid.
Right.
And all the activists got on the social media and say, we got to be out there, we got to protest, we got to do this. And they're calling the ICE agents fascists and stormtroopers and the whole thing. And it turns out they weren't even part of it.
Well, there's nothing new about them using that kind of inflammatory and ridiculous language. I'm curious, do you have any idea or knowledge, were any of these people involved in more than just shouting inanities? Did any of them attempt to interfere with law enforcement? And if so, were they, please dear Lord, arrested?
From what I understand, they did not, because you were not allowed to go on the San John Road. So people trying to get to work in Prunedale and what all were out of luck.
Oh my!
But no action in that way. It was just that they got on social media condemning Donald Trump, Republicans in general, and the ICE agents, and they're all fascists and what all. And it turns out, if you go to the KSVW or KION websites, they have some details there, but not much, because it's a developing story. But the big thing they hit on is this was not an immigration action at all. I mean, it may turn out to be eventually, but that's not why they went in and did this. But I thought Newsom really fell flat on his face last legal cannabis operation in California, but cannabis is not legal in the majority of the United States. The approval rating with probably the general population is not that high. The
unfortunately
is not that high.
Mark, you're fading in and out, but I'm getting the gist that you're pointing out that Gavin Newsom's ideas and policies, and he personally, have serious problems in the other 49 states.
That's it. He's obviously running for president, and I think his positions would not be acceptable with 90% of the population of the United States. He signed that bill that people can come to California for abortions from other states. He signed the bill that minor children can come for gender-affirming care in California.
We don't use that term. We don't use that term on this program. We talk about sex change operations here because that's what it is.
I was being polite. I have other terms also.
Well, I'm interested in being honest. The left has had a long tradition of taking of being able to come up with for example, nobody is pro-abortion. Nobody goes around saying I'm pro-abortion. No, instead they're pro-choice. Now that you can argue all you want to about the issue, but that's a very clever political maneuver. People who are anti-abortion are anti-abortion, but people who are pro-abortion are pro-choice. Now, frankly, if you manage to frame the argument that way, you've already made some serious points, I think. So this idea that we talk about sex change procedures and surgeries, and we call them gender-affirming care, that is just too much. I will not use that terminology on my program because it is so dishonest.
No, and I totally agree, but that's the bill that he signed, the legalese that they used in that. But again, his policies are out of whack with 90% of the population in the United States, and he's going to have to realize that, I hope, when he gets booted off the campaign trail.
Well, I don't know. I saw him he did a debate with Governor DeSantis of Florida a number of months ago. I don't know whether you saw that or not. Newsom showed himself to be very effective, and I think the reason why is because he's not afraid to outright lie, which he did on a couple of occasions. But nevertheless, he's got that great big smile and that pretty hair, and frankly, it's altogether possible that there would be a lot of people who vote for him that have no idea what the hell he stands for.
Well, I see that in New York City, so unfortunately, you're probably correct in that.
Well, if Newsom runs for president and is confronted by the quality of opposition that Mamdani faces, I mean, Eric Adams, Andrew Cuomo, and Curtis Sliwa, I would be a more credible candidate for mayor of New York than any of those three. So, you can't beat somebody.
That's true.
You can't beat somebody with nobody. And Mr. Mamdani is very fortunate in the quality of the opposition he faces. A bunch of chumps. But hopefully the Republicans will not nominate a chump for president in 2028.
Very true. Anyhow, follow the news from what happened out there, and it's an interesting story. But again, the reactionary local folks around here jumped that it was a INS raid, and it was not. It was law enforcement. And I'd like to hear what you find out why San Bernardino County was able to come up here and do a police action.
Yeah, that in itself sounds interesting. Well, thank you. When I announced your phone call, I said that we always learn something from you, and you did not disappoint. This is something that is entirely new on my radar. So thank you very much for the call and for what you had to tell us.
Thank you for the time, Charles.
Wowie. So a San Bernardino Sheriff's personnel are up here off San Juan Road conducting a police activity. I guess we really don't know exactly what they're doing because they closed the area off. And the local left-wing militia mobilized to complain and gripe about Trump and etc., and there are no federal agents anywhere near it. That's almost funny, except these people can't be embarrassed. Which is a shame. To lose the capability of being embarrassed is a bad thing in itself. It's 11:25. Let me grab my my break for this hour, and then we'll be back with might be with your phone call. As I mentioned earlier to Evan, love it when people call early in the program. It gives us an opportunity to thoroughly explore things. And Evan had topics that he brought to the program today that required some time. You don't want to handle that in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. You need to delve in and to deal with it seriously. So just now it's 11:25. It'll be a couple of minutes from now when I come back. If you're on the phone, I'm going to take your call right away. 831-265-5050 is the number. Don't hesitate.
The Hook is California's first ever cannabis outlet. 100% locally owned and operated, we're here to be your friendly neighborhood hookup. We believe that everyone should have access to fairly priced cannabis, so we work hard to get it to you for 30 to 50% less than the other guys. If you're 21 or older with a valid ID, visit us in Capitola or in Watsonville today. We're here to be your friendly neighborhood hookup. Check out our website, hookoutlet.com, for deals and stay groovy.
Hello, I'm Carolyn. 25 years ago, my husband Rudy and I opened Charlie Hong Kong with the commitment to serve healthy food grown in healthy soil. Today, the healthy food we serve comes from the sacred land in Pajaro Valley, where Dick Peugeot and his Lakeside Organics grow the soil, and the soil grows the healthy plant that we serve to you. When you eat at Charlie Hong Kong, you eat healthy food, and it's delicious. Charlie Hong Kong, Santa Cruz.
Tomatoes, carrots, radishes, onions, squash, watermelon, all things we must eat regularly to survive. Hi, folks, Warren Knox here. Wouldn't it be great to just walk out your front or back door and right there you can pick pesticide and chemical-free food that you grew? You can do just that with a Knox Garden Box, a heavily constructed, elevated garden box that will allow you to grow just about any vegetable or flower there is. Sold assembled or unassembled, shipped worldwide. The therapy of gardening is just a call away. You can find your Knox Garden Box built in Scotts Valley, California, or log on to www.knoxgardenbox.com. Our staff will answer any questions on gardening, so if you don't have a green thumb, believe we can see that you do. Okay, phone number to call is 831-461-0634. Thanks, folks.
Okay, at 11:28, I took Mark's suggestion and I typed in San Juan Road, Watsonville, and among things that comes up from KSBW, Channel 8 in Salinas, 30 detained in Royal Oak's illegal cannabis warehouse raid. No ICE involvement. So evidently what this is all about is, it gets rather confusing, doesn't it? Under the federal government says marijuana is illegal. It's a class 1 controlled substance. The state of California says marijuana isn't legal, but it is legal. It's been decriminalized. I guess, if you've got a government license or something, you can sell it, but if you grow your own, you're a bad boy. This is kind of like the situation with alcoholic beverages, where it's legal, but there's all kinds of licenses and taxes and this and that. And so in parts of the country, like, Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, places like that, they have bootleggers. People operating stills out in the mountains, making alcoholic beverages. White lightning, corn liquor, whatever you want to call it. And they're in violation of the law. But alcoholic beverages are legal. Well, no, in some counties they're illegal. I don't know. My God, you get into all this confusing nonsense. Anyway, what do we have here? We've got a reporter from what looks like KSBW 8. I'm going to go ahead and just for ducks, I'm going to play this because I'm curious to know exactly what's going on here. Mark raised the question, so let me put on my headset, and we'll hear what there is to hear.
Sightings throughout the Central Coast are causing outrage and concern for some local residents. There are constant ICE sightings that are being shared on social media, and whether they are verified or not, they are causing...
Okay, this is not dealing with the episode on San Juan Road. This is mental health services and ICE fears. Spare me. Okay, online rumors have circulated about potential ICE activity on a farm Wednesday morning. That's now. The Allied Rapid Response for Santa Cruz County clarified that law enforcement activity is not related to ICE, but involves agents from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Flora and fauna is what it says here. Watsonville police reported that officers from the San Bernardino Sheriff's Office are also present. The activity was first reported 7:43 a.m. at 1400 San Juan Road in Royal Oaks. The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office confirmed the activity is part of a criminal investigation by their department. Kevin McInerney, he's a commander with the California Department of Cannabis Control Law Enforcement Division, stated that both his department and San Bernardino County Sheriffs are executing a search warrant related to illegal cannabis activity at the site. So somebody has pot they shouldn't have. The warrant issued by San Bernardino County involves a suspected illegal grow warehouse. The search warrant is tied to a case from the Monterey County area. California Department of Marijuana Control assisted due to the cannabis tie. So far, 30 individuals have been detained. Federal officials are aware of this activity. There will be no migration enforcement actions related to the warrant. Officials are in the process of identifying those detained, determining involvement in criminal activity, and releasing individuals as appropriate. Separately, rumors of a raid at a Cameras farm in Greenfield have been dispelled. The organization confirmed there was no raid, adding workers left the site out of fear, but reiterated no ICE activity occurred. So, I guess the takeaway back from this is that everybody is scared to death of immigration and customs enforcement. And again, so if you're here illegal, you should be. And the one person that you should be upset at is Joe Biden. Because by his utterly irresponsible and egregious actions vis-a-vis the border over the last 4 years, he has turned this into a crisis. He has managed to do what no one else has done. He managed to do what Donald Trump in his first term couldn't do. To focus public attention and public outrage on this issue and create a demand for action on the part of a substantial majority of the general public. Last polling result I saw, 58% of a national polling sample favored mass deportations. Anyone in the country illegally should be deported. That amounts to mass deportations. So, Donald Trump talked plenty about illegal immigration from the very beginning of his political career. Things that he campaigned on the first time he got elected president. But at that time, there was not yet a consensus among the American people that it was a crisis that required just serious action. We've got to get these people out of here. We need mass deportations. No, that didn't happen then. And Mr. Trump, for all his mowing, could not create that. It took Joe Biden to do it. Joe Biden admitting an additional 12 to 14 million illegal aliens into the country by opening the southern border succeeded in focusing the attention of the American people, something that is not altogether easy to do, and leading them to call for a definite solution, a legal solution. Deportation. People who are in the country with no right to be here should be returned to their country of origin. We don't fine them. We don't jail them. We don't torture and abuse them. We simply put them back where they belong. This is a humane solution to a problem. Unfortunately, since this, as I mentioned, we talked about this yesterday, this taste for mass deportation, which has now become reality, is sweeping up a lot of people who had simply been flying under the radar, living their lives. Now, granted, they were illegal, didn't have any right to be here, but they minded their own business, kept their heads down, worked hard, essentially were not a burden on their communities, and basically people were willing to look the other way. There was no crisis. There was no reason for getting upset and taking action until Biden. He changed the equation. He created the atmosphere that has led to these activities of ICE, which now the open borders crowd and the lawless people, the people who do not favor the rule of law and do not want the law respected, followed, or obeyed, and they're making themselves clear now. They're coming out of their hidey holes and attempting to instruct law enforcement and calling law enforcement all kinds of awful names. Essentially, we're seeing a growth of the criminal element in the country. I would call these people criminals. After all, they're speaking in favor of criminal activity and against the forces of law and order. What other things do they do? Maybe these are people who think that shoplifting is fine. You just walk into a store, take what you want, and leave. Pay for it? Yeah, let the other chump do that. People then complain about higher prices in the stores when they don't seem to realize they're not only buying their own merchandise, they're buying the merchandise of the person who simply walked out with bags full of stuff. I don't know where in the hell this is ever going to turn out well. I really don't. I think we've seen too much cultural degradation, too much breakdown in the basic fabric of the country. It was John Adams. Our Constitution, he said, is designed for the governance of a virtuous, moral, and decent people. It is wholly inadequate to the governance of any other kind. You remember back to your days in kindergarten, first grade, second grade? Teacher would say, okay, if everybody behaves themselves, we can have this privilege, that privilege, we can have these goodies, those goodies. But if one or two people in the class decide that they want to take advantage of this and exploit this and essentially misbehave, then everybody loses these privileges. We're at the point now where it isn't one or two people in the class, it's 5 or 10. And as a result, everybody else is having to pay the price. And they don't like it. We had the right idea here in California in the 90s when we instituted a 3-strike system. If you're a habitual criminal and you keep getting convicted in court of offenses, after your 3rd offense, we put you away. We don't want you in our society. It's not about punishing you. We realize that you're a criminal. You know, punishing you is not the idea. It's getting you out of our communities. We can't have you. We can't afford you. This is the reason behind incarceration. The most valid reason that I can think of. It's not so much as a matter of punishment for the offender. It's a matter of protection for the innocent. As long as habitual criminals are incarcerated, they are not out burglarizing, assaulting, attacking, marauding, raping, murdering, pillaging, or doing any of the other things that they do for a living. I don't know, that doesn't seem too far-fetched to me. Well, let me see. We've still got, 20 minutes left. I was going to talk a little more about the latest developments with Mr. Trump and what goes on in Russia. The U.S. isn't planning to provide long-range missiles to Ukraine as part of a new aid initiative, President Trump said. He's warning Kiev against targeting Moscow. Now, as I read this is the opening paragraph of a story in the Wall Street Journal. His comments Tuesday at the White House came a day after the president said the U.S. reached an agreement with European allies to provide new weapons for use by Kiev, and he could impose new tariffs on Russia and its trading partners. Mr. Trump called for Ukraine to avoid hitting Moscow. Well, Moscow is the capital. The capital of Ukraine is Kiev. I notice on a daily basis Russian drones and missiles are falling on Kiev. So why in God's green earth would somebody interested in ending this conflict tell the victim nation, bear in mind Ukraine here is the victim, Russia is the aggressor. Why do you tell the victim nation, oh no, don't hit their capital, don't do this, don't do that? That sounds Bidenish to me. I don't like it when Mr. Trump starts sounding like Joe Biden. Now, why would he do that? Well, I was starting to talk about this a while back. We got sidetracked. Mr. Trump is very, very interested in peace. He seriously wants it. And he also was rather heavily invested in the personal relationship he thought he had cultivated and created with Vladimir Putin. And Mr. Trump appears to have at long last arrived at the conclusion that he was in error, that you do not manage to cajole Mr. Putin with sweet talk and flattery and favors. He will take the favors and simply pocket them and ask for more, because he is not interested in making peace. He is interested in conquest. and he has not completed his conquest of Ukraine. And he seems to think that somehow, some way, that is still possible. You know, perhaps Mr. Putin has more in common with the supreme leader, the Ayatollah, than I thought he did. Obviously, Mr. Putin is no religious fanatic. But he is a visionary, a mystic in a way. You know, the supreme leader, the Ayatollah, sees this worldwide caliphate with Allah telling him what to do and him doing it. And, you know, Allah says, kill that guy. So I'll kill that guy. I didn't do that. Allah did that. Now, this is basically the supreme leader. Now, with Putin, he's not motivated by any religious impulses. He is really motivated by a perverted and extreme sense of nationalism and a personal megalomania. Russia is great. I am Russia. I am great. I will win, provided I am not dissuaded, I am not turned from my path. And that is very much like the Ayatollah. He's gotten his nuclear bomb program bombed all to hell and gone. The first thing he's doing is, well, okay, how do we start again? How do we go back to square one, back to the drawing board? Let's get started. I want that bomb, and if it takes a little longer, that's okay. I want the bomb. Single-minded, perseverant, unswerving. You know, you almost got to admire this cat. A lot of valuable character traits there. Unfortunately, they're all in the service of an unspeakable evil. And Mr. Putin seems to have a piece of that. He seems to have the idea, well, if I just keep at this long enough, my opponents they'll get tired of resisting me. The people who are helping Ukraine, they'll lose interest, they'll walk away. They'll all turn into Tucker Carlson and say, oh, I'd rather not be bothered. And it's, I don't like war, so I'm not going to play. Which means, of course, that if Vladimir Putin says he's going to play and you don't, then he rolls over you and takes what he wants. Which in Tucker Carlson's world is fine. He's happy with that. His ox isn't gored, so he doesn't mind. Having Vladimir Putin sitting across the border from El Paso at Ciudad Juarez, glowering at him, wouldn't bother him a bit. Oh, you stay on your side of the border, we're fine. So Mr. Trump slowly, glacially, is coming to the conclusion that Vladimir Putin really is a stink pot, and that he really is absolutely determined to further his cause and his dictatorship by armed force and aggression, and that in order to stop him, you're going to have to resort to some armed force. Mr. Trump is now operating the way he did against the Supreme Leader. Yeah, we're going to give him 60 days to come to the negotiating table and talk all this out. Well, to Mr. Trump's credit, at the end of those 60 days, it was bombs away. Now he's given Mr. Putin 50 days. At the end of those 50 days, he promises an advanced sanctions regime. What ought to happen at the end of those 50 days is seizure of all Russian currency assets. I think there's some $300 billion in Russian money parked in Western banks. A lot of it belongs to Mr. Putin's oligarch friends, the people who are the ones who keep him in power. What if all of a sudden they saw that all of their money was seized and now being used to pay for weapons going to Ukraine to kill Russian soldiers? Wow. I love that. And certainly Mr. Trump is aware of it. It's not like with Joe Biden, you have to wonder where, is he even conscious of this? No, Trump is very much aware of what's going on around him and aware of all the options that he has at his disposal. There's no question of that. The question is, what will he be willing to do and when will he be willing to do it? He says he wants peace. I believe him. How long will it be before he is willing to do the things that will be necessary to achieve peace? Because until that happens, what he's doing right now, and this is what worries me, he is adopting the Biden policy. Keep providing weaponry to the Ukrainians, give them the means to carry on the fight, to keep from being overwhelmed. And so the war goes on day in, day out, week in, week out. Thousands of soldiers die every week, and it just goes on and on. That was the Biden policy. That was the Biden policy. That must not be Mr. Trump's policy. Mr. Trump must have a policy that envisions peace through deterrence and victory. Earlier in the program, we talked about how President Reagan brought about such a victory in the Cold War without ever going to the battlefield. No armies marched, no bombs fell. The Soviet Union fell apart. That was done through economic pressure. I submit to you that right now, Russia is in the same sort of condition it was under the Soviet. They have never set up, they hate capitalism so much that they will not set up a system that creates wealth. The Russians seem culturally allergic to the creation of wealth. The only time that ever seemed on the verge of changing was in the very early years of the 20th century when they had a government minister named Stolypin who was actually implementing reforms that were enabling human beings, motivating human beings, putting them into the mindset and work mode of creating wealth. Needless to say, Stolypin was assassinated. One time there was a quote from Lenin who made remark that if Stolypin had lived, there would have been no revolution. He understood that Stolypin and his reforms would actually create a vibrancy to the Russian economy that would lead people to be more loyal to the state and refuse to turn against it. But again, that was well over 100 years ago. The Russian people since then, through the Soviet era and now in the Putin era, have been brutalized into believing that capitalism is a terrible system, and so they won't use it, and so they remain poor, because capitalism is the only system that has ever led to the mass creation of wealth. This, incidentally, is the big difference today between China and Russia. Chinese leaders were pragmatic enough to understand that capitalism does create wealth, and so they adopted capitalism. They didn't call it that. Couldn't very well go out and say, hey, the Chinese Communist Party is going capitalist. No, you don't say a thing like that. So you call it with communism with Chinese characteristics. That was their official term. That's almost as bad as gender-affirming care, isn't it? communism with Chinese characteristics. And by adopting those Chinese characteristics, i.e. capitalism, China experienced explosive economic growth, is now the world's second largest economy, and poses a much more real threat to the world order than Russia does. Because in order to pose that kind of a threat to the world order, you have to have economic strength as well as an army and a bunch of nuclear weapons. Russia is kind of a giant North Korea. North Korea has been it's been called the hermit state. Very isolated. What do they have? They have a very large standing army. I think they have a population in North Korea of something like 20 million. And out of that 20 million, something like 2 or 2.5 million are in the army. Now think about that. That would mean, equivalent in America if we had a 35 million man army. Give me a break. The entire population of the state of California would be in the armed services. Please. Well, that's North Korea. That's their model. The only reason the country exists is to support Kim Jong-un and his military and his personal habits. That's it. The Soviet Union was much the same way. To hell with the people. The reason the state exists is to support the Communist Party and the military. In today's Russia, the reason everything exists is to support Vladimir Putin, his friends, and the military. The flag may change, but the business model, the governing model, doesn't change at all. It's the same as it was. And today, Mr. Putin runs the country basically the same way that Leonid Brezhnev did. Brezhnev was the first among equals. He was the head of the Politburo. If he wanted to do something, obviously the Politburo would be consulted and put to a vote. And there were, 10, 12 guys who sat around a table, and this is how business was done. It's the same with Putin. He has this group of oligarchs, the most corrupt of a corrupt society, the people who have managed to amass the biggest personal fortunes and the biggest empires of influence and intimidation. And they share these positions. They're essentially Putin's Politburo. And they're the only ones who actually have any restraint over him. Frankly, when he does come down, as he eventually will, I believe, it will be this Politburo that brings him down. They will simply run out of patience with him, and they will say, that's enough. We can't afford you anymore. And at that point, Mr. Putin will find himself, if he's lucky, he'll have the same thing happen to him that happened to Khrushchev. He'll be retired to some nice dacha somewhere where he can tend his flowers and live to ripe old age. It's altogether possible that it may take something more dramatic than that with Mr. Putin. He may simply disappear. But in the meantime, so far as Americans are concerned, I continually remind my friends of this. Donald Trump, I don't care what your attitude towards him is, even if you hate, loathe, and despise him, Donald Trump has never tortured or killed another human being. No matter what other things he's done in his life, Donald Trump has never tortured or killed another human being. Vladimir Putin did that for a living. That was his career. Donald Trump was a real estate developer. He made deals. Sometimes he disadvantaged people. Sometimes he bankrupted. He was a swashbuckling businessman. But he never tortured or killed a human being. Vladimir Putin was an agent in the KGB, an officer. He supervised and participated in the torture and killing of other human beings. There is no moral equivalency between these two men at all. I wonder if anybody has ever told this to Donald Trump. Mr. Trump, here is something you must understand about Vladimir Putin. Because Putin seems to have this way, as I said, those snake eyes of his, he charms people. George W. Bush making googly noises over him. This is a man who tortures and kills human beings as an occupation, as a way of life. That was his career. Once you keep that in mind, to watch him operate his meat grinder on the Ukrainian war front should be no less ghastly, but far more understandable. We're through. I'll be back with you Thursday morning, tomorrow morning at 9:06. Stay tuned now to SantaCruzVoice.com. I'm Charles Freedman. Thank you very much for listening to the program today, and thanks particularly to our callers. Okay. So, we're not ending. Boom. 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 Okay, I'm not going to take a chance on saying anything that will interrupt